Hey there, welcome back to the Beginner's Garden Podcast. If you're like many backyard gardeners, especially if you are a newer backyard gardener, maybe you want to grow some of your own ingredients for salsa or pizza. I know for me as a new gardener, I plunged into the idea of growing a salsa garden and even a spaghetti garden because that was actually something that my kids liked more than pizza. And I plunged headlong into it. It was really a fun project. My son at the time, he's 17 now, but I think he was maybe 5 or 6, he had his own little spaghetti garden, and our goal was to grow all the ingredients we could for spaghetti. And whether you want to grow some kind of a pizza garden or a salsa garden, or if you just want to grow tomatoes, peppers, and herbs and other ingredients for everything else that might not be pizza and salsa, I hope that you'll learn a few things here in this episode that will help you be a little bit more successful. Today, as we talk about how to grow your own ingredients for pizza and salsa, I'm going to talk to you about how not all of these ingredients are actually grown in the same season and how to overcome that. That was a big mistake that I had made as a beginning gardener. We'll also talk about, if you're interested in growing pizza sauce, how you can plant a specific type of tomato that will make that a little bit easier for you. We'll also talk about different types of peppers that you can grow and a few tips when it comes to growing peppers. And then we're going to talk about the herbs that are so easy for you to add in your pizza and your salsa and even your spice cabinet that are actually a lot easier than you think. But before we get started, I wanted to make sure that you know that we're going to be diving even deeper into this topic in my next workshop, which is in 2 days. If you're listening to this live, it's on Thursday, April 25th, 2024 at 7 p.m. Central Time. If you are listening to this later or watching on YouTube later, you can still go and get a ticket to the replay. And if you can't make it live, we'll get you the replay as well. But we're going to be diving a lot deeper into all of these subjects to give you step-by-step on how to grow your own pizza and salsa garden. That way, if you're just beginning to garden and peppers and tomatoes are really priorities to you, along with some of these other ingredients we're going to be talking about, I'm going to be able to make it easy for you. And like I said, if you're not interested in salsa or pizza, but you're wanting to grow these ingredients, this workshop will be for you. So you can go to journeywithjill.net/pizza and grab your ticket. So let's jump into the biggest, I guess, aha moment that I had when I first started trying to grow a salsa garden in particular. That kind of shocked me because when I first started my garden, the big thing really was Pinterest. That was where I was getting a lot of my ideas. And there were all these beautiful pins on how to grow a salsa garden. And it sounded so eclectic and so fun. Like I could plant everything all at once in the same garden. And voila, I have ingredients for salsa. And while there's a little bit of truth to that, it's a little bit more nuanced than I realized as a beginning gardener. And here's why. Not all of the ingredients that you can grow in your garden to be able to have salsa are planted, grown, and harvested at the same time. This can be a little bit frustrating because when you picture a salsa garden, you're probably picturing, especially if you're a new gardener, you're picturing planting it all at once, harvesting all at once, and having all the ingredients at the ready. And while you can do that with some ingredients, you won't be able to do that most likely with all. So the biggest disappointment is that, let me give you an example. With tomatoes and peppers, they are going to harvest in the summer, which most of the time those harvests overlap. In my climate, we start harvesting tomatoes before we start harvesting peppers, and I think that would be very similar to most places, even though eventually their harvest times do overlap. But the disappointing ingredient is cilantro. What most beginning gardeners don't realize, and I come across it every day, they do not realize that cilantro does not like the heat. It does not grow well in the summer, sometimes at all. In fact, cilantro loves the cool weather. In my climate, zone 8A, it will grow all throughout the winter, but even if you are in a cooler climate, you're going to find that cilantro thrives in the fall and in the spring when you're still getting freezing temperatures, you're still getting frost. Basically, the time of year that tomatoes and peppers are not growing well, which makes it a little bit frustrating because I mean, maybe you're one of those people who think that cilantro tastes like soap. That may be in your genetics, but for the rest of us, cilantro is a big deal. Like that to me is what makes my salsa. So the discovery that I wasn't going to be able to have fresh cilantro at the same time as my tomatoes and peppers was quite disappointing, especially when I wanted to grow it all in my garden so it could truly be a garden fresh salsa with all the ingredients. So knowing that problem, what can you do to still be able to get cilantro from your garden that you're growing and be able to use it in your salsa? The easiest thing for me to do, and if you're listening to this, you may still be able to do this depending on how your spring is going. I know for me, I'm recording this in April and my cilantro already bolted, which basically means if you're new, what will happen with cilantro is instead of having this very leafy plant with the flat, wide leaves that you see in your cilantro bunches in the grocery store, those leaves will start to look feathery, especially from the center. And then you'll notice that the center stalk of the cilantro will start to elongate and grow. And out of that central stalk, you're going to see even more feathery leaves. Now, if you taste that cilantro, it's going to taste very different. It's going to taste a little bit more bitter. And to be honest with you, you've probably tasted this before because I've noticed personally, if I ever have to buy cilantro at the grocery store in the middle of the summer, it has that kind of flavor. And I think it's because even if they're trying to harvest it somewhere where it's cooler, it's still not at its peak. So cilantro in the summer sometimes can have that flavor anyway, but it can be this bitter flavor that is not going to be all that appetizing in your salsa. So what I would recommend you do, if your cilantro, if you've already planted it and it hasn't bolted yet, I would recommend try to get it harvested before it bolts. In my climate, cilantro will start to bolt when the temperatures get into the 70s and for sure low 80s. So if it hasn't bolted yet, go ahead and harvest it. And this is what I do. It's super simple. I just stick the leaves in a freezer bag. I don't worry about like chopping it up or anything like that. Like I take the stem whole and everything and I put it in a freezer bag and I just put it in the freezer and I just let them freeze like that. And then when it comes to making salsa in the summer, I'll just take those leaves and stems out and I will just snip them. They're a little bit frozen, that they're pretty easy to cut, and I'll snip them and put them in the salsa that way. So if you still have cilantro in the spring right now, go ahead and harvest it before it starts to bolt and then save it in your freezer until it's time to make salsa a little bit later. Now, if your cilantro has already bolted or you haven't planted cilantro yet, there's another hack that I honestly have not yet tried, but I'm in the process of trying this year, but I've heard it works great. I'm going to talk to you more about that at the workshop, and I'm really excited about the possibility of actually having fresh grown cilantro in the summer. So if you're coming to the workshop, I'll share with you more about that. The other thing you can do, which no shame in this, I totally do this when I have to, is supplement with grocery store cilantro. And again, in my opinion, it's not always the best quality, especially in the high part of the summer, just depending on, I guess, where the grocery stores source it from. But there's no shame in that. If you're growing your own tomatoes and you're using it for salsa, that's great. You're using your fresh tomatoes that are going to taste way better than anything you could buy at the grocery store, and then you can supplement with the other ingredients. Then totally do that. But if you are planting cilantro and you're hoping for that to be in harvest at the same time, I want to make sure that you are not disappointed when that doesn't happen. And then also that you don't think that you failed as a gardener. What's happening with my cilantro? And just so you know that that's the life cycle of the cilantro, you haven't done anything wrong. And in the future, plant it in the fall, plant it in the early spring, and then adjust in that way. The second thing I want to talk to you about, we'll switch to pizza sauce. And this is something that I've just embraced doing the last few years, and I've really enjoyed making my own pizza sauce. I can control the ingredients as far as the flavor. I can, tamp down a flavor that might be a little strong for my kids, or I might ramp up the flavor in another area. But all that to say, pizza sauce has been a fun thing for me to have on the shelf. It makes an easy, quick dinner. All I have to do is get the pizza crust and have a few toppings. The pizza sauce is already there, and it's really delicious. But here's the thing about pizza sauce, and this is something to keep in mind, especially if you have a smaller garden, and that is the type of tomatoes that you grow will make a difference with your pizza sauce. And let me explain to you what that difference means. Pizza sauce is best done, just like other tomato sauces, in my opinion, like tomato paste, best done with paste tomatoes. Paste tomatoes are the tomatoes that aren't as juicy on the inside, but they have a lot more flesh. If you open up a paste tomato, if you slice it down the middle, it is dense and full. You're not seeing a lot of seeds, really. You're not seeing air pockets. The juice isn't just like spilling out all over you like a juicy slicing tomato. It is a more dense tomato. Now, you can use all tomatoes for pizza sauce, so please don't get me wrong, but you will enjoy the process and actually be able to have more sauce from paste tomatoes in particular. And one reason is because pizza sauce is going to have a consistency that's a little bit thicker than tomato sauce, but also a little bit thinner than tomato paste. And in order to have this thicker sauce, the paste tomatoes are going to lend better to that because they are going to create a thicker sauce off the bat. It will provide more bulk to your sauce. For example, if you're comparing two tomatoes that are the same size, let's say you have something like a large paste tomato like Hungarian heart, and you have a large slicing tomato like Brandywine, and let's say they're the exact same size. If you cut them open and you use the flesh, you're going to get way more product out of the Hungarian heart, out of that paste tomato, because it has more flesh and less juice. So you're actually going to get more out of that tomato to use for sauce than you would a slicing tomato. Another thing is when you're using these paste tomatoes, you're going to have to simmer it down to some degree to get it the consistency that you want, but you're going to simmer it down a much less amount of time than you would a slicing tomato that's really, really runny, really, really juicy. So to be able to get more for the amount of tomatoes that you grow, a paste tomato is going to be best for pizza sauce, but not only pizza sauce, any kind of tomato sauce that you use, tomato sauce, spaghetti sauce, tomato paste tomatoes are going to be better for you to be able to get more out of it. Overall efficiency is better. But like I said, if all you've grown is slicing tomatoes or juicy tomatoes, you can still make pizza sauce, and it's probably going to be very flavorful because in general, those juicy slicing tomatoes have a little bit more flavor than the paste tomatoes do. But if you're still trying to decide what tomatoes to grow for your pizza sauce, your tomato sauce, paste tomatoes are going to be your better option. Again, in the workshop, I'm going to be talking to you about some of my favorite tomatoes for both pizza sauce and for salsa. There's a little bit of nuance there. I've used lots of different tomatoes for both, but I'll share with you some of my favorite varieties there. Next, let's move on to peppers. When it comes to your salsa and pizza both, you will most likely want to have peppers. But you're not as boxed into a particular type of pepper as you might see in recipes. And this is really good news, especially if you might live in an area that it's harder to grow certain peppers, or if you want to adjust the flavor profile just a little bit, you have a little bit more flexibility. So let's talk about salsa in particular. Most salsas will require some kind of bell pepper in the ingredients. And bell peppers themselves are what a lot of us do grow, and we grow easily. But I will say, from listening to growers in different parts of the country and different climates, I have found that more northern growers can sometimes have a more difficult time with bell peppers just because they take longer to mature, they take longer to get large, and they don't grow as easily as they do for those of us in the South. And also because they take longer, they love the heat. What you might find, and I find this in the South too, but you may find this even more of an issue in the North, is that your tomatoes are all coming on at the same time and you're still waiting for your peppers. So you're actually waiting a little bit longer for your peppers. And if all you do is rely on that bell pepper, then you might find the timing to be a little bit off on that. But what I didn't realize until I really started looking at seed catalogs and trying different things is that, and maybe this is just me, but what I didn't realize is that you can grow sweet peppers that are not bell peppers. Now, bell peppers are kind of considered sweet peppers because they don't have the heat to them, but it's not a matter of choosing bell peppers or choosing hot peppers. There are actually sweet peppers that are not necessarily your large bell peppers that will actually work really well in salsa. Some of these sweet peppers are a lot smaller. The fruit is actually a lot smaller. And what that means for you is it'll actually mature quicker. You'll get the harvest faster. And if you choose some of those smaller peppers, then this might be easier for you to be able to get your tomatoes and your peppers harvested at the same time. You can do something like I grow sweet pickle peppers every year. We like to put those on the grill. They're kind of small, and so they would require quite a bit of chopping to put in salsa. I don't know if I've ever used those in salsa, but you totally could as a replacement for bell peppers. Or you can just find other ones that maybe don't get as large that are specifically mentioned in the seed catalog as sweet bell peppers or sweet peppers. They don't necessarily have to be bells, but that's why I say open your mind if you have trouble with bell peppers or you want to do a pepper that harvests a little bit sooner, you can find sweet peppers that aren't necessarily bells. With salsa, you also have a little bit of an option when it comes to the peppers that you put in your salsa. For example, maybe you want a hotter salsa because you like the hot salsas, or maybe you want a milder salsa because you can't handle the heat. Most salsa recipes will call for a jalapeno pepper or maybe something very similar to a jalapeno pepper. But when it comes to salsa recipes, you can actually switch out the type of pepper. And even in canning, it's really important to follow a tested canning recipe. But as long as you keep the amount the same, you could switch out the type of peppers without any problem. For example, with us, what we will do sometimes is we'll switch out the jalapeno pepper with a pepper that isn't as spicy. One of our favorites is called jalapeno. I can't remember where I got it. I've been growing it for a long time, but it's a jalapeno without the heat. Absolutely love it. I had a friend who told me she's growing a variety called jalapenos, I think. So I think the premise is the same. It's basically a jalapeno, but it's not as hot. So I will switch that out in my salsa recipes to have a more mild salsa. But maybe you like it a little bit more spicy, then you might want to choose a serrano, or you might want to let your jalapenos turn red. So any kind of pepper, almost all peppers that I know of at their mature state, they're going to eventually turn red. There might be some colored ones that are a little bit different, but jalapenos for sure, if you let them stay on the plant, they're going to turn red and they'll get a little bit hotter. I haven't really found them to be like fire engine hot or anything like that, but they'll get a little bit more spicy. So you can do that. Or you can use something like a serrano or like a pepper that's just a little bit hotter on the Scoville scale, and you can adjust it that way. That way you can make your salsa the heat level that you want it to be based on what you grow. And of course, you've got the different toppings of pizza, going back to pizza. Maybe you like red bell peppers on your pizza, but maybe you like banana peppers on your pizza. Or I know one thing that I fell in love with last year. I'd never done it before, but I love candied jalapenos. Particularly, I love candied notapenos because they're not so hot and they are delicious on pizza. So all that to say, don't be afraid to step out and try some different flavors and try them out, see what you like, because I'll tell you, there's so many different options of peppers. And if you like peppers, this will be a fun experiment for you to try. And finally, I can't talk about pizza in particular without talking about all the flavorful herbs that you can grow for your pizza sauce. Now, this is to me one of the best parts of making my own homemade pizza sauce is that I can use my own homemade or homegrown herbs, because if you've ever grown your own herbs before, you know that the flavor of what you grow yourself is absolutely unmatched to whatever you buy at the grocery store. It is incredible. And it's easier to grow your own herbs and spices for pizza or other kitchen uses than you think. Most of the herbs that you're going to be growing for pizza sauce, and I'm going to list them all for you. I'm going to have recipes and all that if you're coming to the Pizza and Salsa Garden workshop. But most of these are going to be perennial herbs. Perennial herbs are herbs that will last year after year. Now, a lot of this will depend on your location. Some herbs will not survive your winter, but many of these will. I think oregano will survive most people's winter in particular. I haven't bought oregano in probably since the first time I bought oregano years and years ago, because it continues coming back year after year. And so you're basically purchasing the one plant the one time, and it's going to continue coming back, and you continue getting fresh herbs. Another thing is that these herbs grow fantastically in containers. And so if you're just a container gardener, or if you're growing in a small garden space, or if you're like me and you have raised beds and ground beds, but that's a lot to keep up with, putting your herbs in a container makes them so much easier to deal with, because they don't require a whole lot of effort. They don't require a whole lot of maintenance. You pretty much plant them, water them occasionally, and they're good. To me, herbs are really the easiest way to get started growing your own food in a way that you get so much reward, just because the flavor is incredible. And like I said, I grow all of these in containers. They're easy to grow in a small space. And then the way you use them, of course, you can use them fresh, but you can also use them dry, like I do in my garden. I dry them. Sometimes I hang dry them. Sometimes I dehydrate them, and you'll be able to use them year round. But going back to the pizza sauce, they're absolutely delicious in that pizza sauce, and it's easier than you think. So at the very least, you're probably growing tomatoes if you're like most gardeners, and you can add some herbs. Most people are growing peppers too, but so you got tomatoes, peppers, herbs. That gives you a lot of ingredients for your own salsa and your own pizza. Now we're going to go into some of the other ingredients that you can also grow for some of these things, like onions and garlic and even fennel. I'm going to talk to you about all of that if you're going to be at the Pizza and Salsa Garden workshop in a couple of days. And so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. But at the very least, being able to grow your own tomatoes and herbs and peppers for salsa and pizza will be so rewarding for you if you've never done it before, and you can totally do it. And if you have kids at home, so fun. Get them involved. They're going to love it. And you're all going to be able to see the difference in quality of the product that you make in your salsa and in your pizza compared to anything you would have bought at the store. So again, if you want to dive in deeper into how to grow your own ingredients for pizza and salsa, check out my workshop at journeywithjill.net/pizza. This is a live workshop. I'm going to be having a couple of demonstration videos for you, and you're going to be able to have a workbook to take notes, but also that workbook is going to have recipes to my pizza sauce, my homemade Italian seasoning mix that goes in the pizza sauce, and also one of my favorite salsas. So you get all of that with your ticket to the workshop. You can go to the link in the description, direct link, or go to journeywithjill.net/pizza. I hope that this has been a fun episode and a helpful episode for you, whether or not you're growing for pizza and salsa, but at the very least, giving you some ideas for some of the most fun ingredients you can grow in your summer garden. And I thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a fabulous day, and hopefully you can get out in your garden and enjoy your weather on this beautiful day.